let me ask you, do you like those episodes of Star Trek where something attacks the Enterprise and all the cast fling themselves around all over the place whilst the camera unconvincingly shakes to simulate the style of something impacting the Enterprise? If the answer is yes, would you like a whole movie of that? Then watch Shark Hunter, a 2001 Megalodon movie. Megalodon is also, as it's known in some countries, directed by the amusingly named Matt Codd and starring Anthony Sabato Jr. Now, this one essentially is about a guy played by Anthony Sabato Jr. who has designed a revolutionary new submarine, and he is kind of traumatized by an accident in his path where he was on a boating trip and he thinks his family were killed by a megalodon. Cut to his adult life, and he is asked to go and investigate the sudden disappearance of this deep sea underwater base, and to go in this kind of submarine that he's helped create. Whilst he is on this trip down to the bottom of the ocean, they discover there is indeed, in fact, a living megalodon, and that is what has attacked the base. And now they must fight for their lives in lots of kind of cockpit shots whilst the camera's getting thrown around. Will they survive? You have to watch the movie to find out. So, let's talk about, first of all, what works with Shark Hunter. Okay, so a couple of things. As much as I kind of take the piss a little bit of the shaky cam in the cockpit scenario, when you're dealing with something like a megalodon, you realistically probably are going to be swimming around with it, because obviously you have to go in deep water, and it's probably not even going to bother with something the size of a human. So you really have to have it be in a submarine or a submersible to have any type of real kind of meaningful contact with it. So I will give it that. There have been a few Megalodon movies that have popped up over the past 20 years or so, and realistically, to have to deal with Megalodon, that is something that you'd probably have to be more of a realistic take on it. Anyway, what else do I like? Grand L. Bush as the character Harrington, I think, is by far and away my favourite character in this movie, as a kind of like an angry engineer who has got some great one-liners, and I would say 100% is the best actor on the sets here. That is pretty. He has some pretty funny lines, I must admit, and a really kind of likeable character, although he has this kind of like this sort of gruff ulterior. It's also somewhat refreshing to have the majority of the crew here immediately want to try and kill this megalodon, and only one of them wants to try and preserve it for scientific reasons rather than financial gain. So it's kind of, I like the fact that we don't have the typical kind of like human bad guy that we kind of get in these films, always in there to kind of pad out the running time because they can't afford to do special effects on these kind of things. So that was kind of appreciated. And there are some reasonable kind of set designs here on the kind of the interior of the submarine, and the intro where we kind of see the kind of the flashback where Anthony Sabato's Jr. character as a kid, and he's remembering the kind of the shark attack in this kind of foggy open ocean is pretty effective. But to be honest, this movie is fairly forgettable. Early 2000 movies kind of discovered how to do sort of CGI and make kind of what was considered grand special effects for, relatively cheap. So we had a plethora of kind of CGI movies or CGI, effects in movies that were going to take place because it was the new thing. And they really haven't dated well. I mean, looking at it now, 20 years later, it's pretty horrible. And even back then, when I remember these kind of films coming, I never really thought it looked particularly good back then. But nowadays, it really, really sticks out, and it makes you realise that a rubber shark is sometimes far better than the CGI. The main problem, as I was kind of alluded to at the beginning here, is that to save money, this movie is just a lot of interior shots where the camera is kind of shaking around to kind of simulate, the shark hitting the submarine and things like that. Whilst their actors are kind of flinging themselves about. And then the main threat actually comes from things going wrong within the submarine, and them having to try and kind of, you know, find ways to try and get around it. We have a few kind of external shots where we see a CGI shark, you know, being chased by a CGI submersible, or vice versa. We do have a couple of scenes where we see sort of divers, amusingly, that they're clearly not underwater photography. It's just, you know, regular out in a set with someone kind of sprinkling little bits of dust over the top of them to simulate, you know, the silt coming down. It's clearly, obviously not kind of underwater photography. It's quite amusing. The cheapness of this kind of production kind of really does show through, and how they've tried to shortcut their way. Now, obviously, it was not a made for a cinema movie. It's a cheaper, you know, straight to TV or DVD film. So it is what it is. But again, it just really shows. The budget really does show. I think the characters outside of Harrington, who I like, I said I like, played by Grant L. Bush. The rest of them are all pretty stock characters, to be honest, and the acting isn't brilliant from a good portion of them as well. It ends quite abruptly and is ultimately quite forgettable, because it's all very dark. And I guess that, again, it's kind of realistic. It's a bit like that movie Underwater that had a lot of complaints because it was so dark. But the reality is that is what it's going to be like. But for when you're watching a film, the problem is it's a lot of darkness. You can't really see what's going on. And the movie is just kind of like 85% full of, you know, someone in a set pretending they're in a submarine and just kind of shaking around and stuff like that. So it's not particularly interesting, to be honest with you. It's just a really forgettable movie on the kind of the killer shark genre. And to be honest, I never really felt like we got a proper good look at the shark. We only ever see it either in murky waters or kind of close-ups of it swimming past. So you never really get a sense that the shark is actually going to eat something. There's only one shot where it pops out of like a diving hole within the kind of the submarine. It's the only time you ever get a really good look at it, and even then it's just its head. So not one of the better shark movies, I will say. I'll give it a 4 out of 10, because I think, you know, having it a submarine versus a megalodon is probably more of a realistic scenario than, you know, people versus a megalodon exactly. And I really like Grant L. Bush in this role, but it is a below average movie. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.